My name is Yuri. Title of presentation on construction of singular splines. Authors Демьянович, Евдокимова, Иванцова, Лебединский, Пономарева. St. Petersburg State University. One of the approaches to the problem of approximating functions with a singularity is the creation of an approximating apparatus based on splines with the same feature. For spline-wavelet decomposition of spline spaces, it is important to the property of the embedding of these spaces is associated with the embedding grids. In this paper, the approximation relations are considered to determine coordinate splines with a predefined singularity. The concept of generalized smoothness is introduced. It allows us to consider functions with singularity as generalized smooth functions. Corresponding approximation relations are constructed. The existence and uniqueness of coordinate splines with the mentioned feature are established. The linear shells of the coordinate splines are space with the property of embedding on the embedding grids. Keywords: singular splines, generalized smoothness, approximation relations, embedding spaces, algorithms. One, introduction. In practice, we often deal with functions which have singular points, either with the discontinuation of function or their derivatives in certain points. The solution of the problem of the approximation for functions with a singularity can be the creation of an approximating apparatus based on splines with the same feature. Simultaneously, it is important the embedding property of spline spaces is associated with the embedding grids for approximation, for wavelet decomposition, and so on. See first to 12. Two approaches exist for an approximation of such functions. The first of them is the extraction, additive or multiplicative, of singularities from the discussed function, and then approximation of the function rest. The second one is an introduction of the mentioned singularity in the approximation apparatus, C1, 2, 3. The second approach is usually more simple because it requires less than the priori information about the function in question. It is not required to know the exact function characteristics, its asymptotic behavior, and the order of the defining multipliers, etc. In connection with the spline approximation, it is the most natural to use the approximate relations for constructing coordinate splines and for defining the corresponding spline spaces. In the second approach, the accounting of the singularity is produced on the right side of the approximate relations. That is produced on the generating vector function. On the other hand, it is very important to have the sequence of embedded spaces for the successive approximation of the mentioned function. It is very important for the spline-wavelet theory 4 to 5. With regard to splines, it is most convenient to obtain the system of embedded spaces on embedded grids. Simple examples show that the use of the approximative relations does not guarantee the mentioned property. Slide 4. Now I want to say that in this presentation there are about 3,000 slides in which the construction of the singular splines is described in great detail. Since the listeners and the audience have the opportunity to stop the presentation anywhere and look at one or another slide in detail, in the further presentation, I will take this opportunity into account. I will be giving very brief comments on the following slides, and those slides that serve as the natural link connecting the individual parts of the presentation will even be left without comment at all. On the fourth and fifth slides, the usual notation for the scalar and vector products of three-component vector is introduced. As well as the notation for the determinant of a three-column square matrix. Here are an infinitive grid X is defined on the interval B of real axis with condensation points A and B respectively. We also introduce linear space of functions U x xi plus 1 and their direct products. On the sixth slide, the concept of a complete chain of vectors is introduced. A chain of three-dimensional vectors is called complete if any triple of successive vectors of the chain is linear independent system. See relation 3. Using approximation relations for the function omega j are determined. See formulas 5 to 8. Here, an a priori given three-component vector function phi of t appears, the definition of which determines the properties of the function omega j. On the seventh and eighth slides, linear functionals FIS minus and FIS plus are considered, the simple models of which are the limit values of S derivatives at the node xi, left and right respectively, provided that their values coincide on the vector function phi, the vector chain is determined, which is used to obtain singular splines omega j. It is the introduction of the functionals FIS minus and FIS plus that allows us to consider generalized continuity instead of ordinary continuity. The characterization of these functionals allows us to consider integral continuity, weighted continuity, etc. Moreover, functions with the singularities for which there is no usual continuity may turn out to be generalized smooth. The role and value of smoothness can be illustrated by example of splines. In the introduction, the importance of embedded spline spaces on embedded grids was noted. Obtaining splines from approximation relations does not guarantee such embedding. It turns out that adding the requirement of maximum smoothness leads to the mentioned embedding. The same phenomenon is observed when the condition of maximum generalized smoothness is added, thus proving the existence of splines of the generalized maximum smoothness. We simultaneously obtain a sequence of embedded spaces of singular splines on embedded grids. The 9th to 12th slides are devoted to finding the conditions under which the chain of vectors Bi, considered in the manner just indicated, is complete. It turns out that for completeness of this chain, the completeness of the chain of vectors Nj is sufficient. That is slides 9 to 11 and 12. 9, 10, 11, and 12. Everybody can see theorem 1 here and proof of it. Since from the 13th to the 21st, the previously introduced functionals are made depend on the continuous parameter t. Thus, it becomes possible to consider not only point feature, but also features of a more general nature, namely features distributed over an interval. Assuming that the dependence on the parameter is twice differentiable, relations are obtained that are interesting in themselves. See theorem 2, 3, and 4. Theorem 2 with proof of it. Theorem 3 also with proof. and theorem for this proof. The results of these considerations are theorem 5, the consequence of which is the existence of singular splines of spaces of splines of generalized maximum smoothness. We have here remark and also corollary 4, corollary 5, this proves theorem 5. Everybody can write it if you want. Thus, the results of this consideration are theorem 5, the consequence of which is the existence of singular splines of spaces of splines of generalized maximum smoothness. As noted earlier, this implies embedding of the mentioned spaces on embedded grids. Now we go to conclusion. This article proposes a general approach to constructing spaces of the singular splines for approximated functions that have a singularity in the function itself or in its derivatives. This approach introduces the concept of the generalized smoothness. Due to this, a function with a singularity can be considered as generalized smooth. This approach leads to the construction of a system of embedding spaces on the embedded grids. The sequence of the embedded spaces is necessary for approximation of singular functions, for implementing the finite element method in the generate problems, for construction of the multi-grid methods, and also for wavelet decomposition of the singular numerical flows. The system of embedded spaces, its wavelet decomposition, and its application in this finite element method are supposed to be presented in an extended version of this paper. Here we have references, slide 23, slide 24 also references, slide 25 also references. Thank you.